I want to propose something that most financial professionals would consider a strange way to begin a conversation about money. I want to propose that the most important act of financial planning available to a married couple over 50 is not an investment decision, not a tax strategy, not a retirement income plan, as important as all of those are. The most important act of financial planning available to a married couple over 50 is a conversation that most couples have never had, that neither spouse has explicitly avoided, but that somehow never happens, and that would take less than a full afternoon to complete in its most basic form. The conversation is this: if you died tonight, does your spouse know exactly where everything is, what everything means, and what they should and should not do in the first year? Not generally, exactly. And then the reciprocal question: does your spouse know that you know these things about their financial life too? My name is William Grant. The revelation I want to build today is not about any particular financial instrument or planning technique. It is about a structural problem that exists inside the majority of long marriages and that is almost never identified as a problem until the moment it becomes an emergency. The problem is what I call financial solitude, the condition in which each spouse has complete competence in their own domain of financial management and genuine ignorance of their partner's domain, maintained comfortably and without friction for decades of shared life, and presenting itself as the catastrophic preparedness deficit that it actually is only when one of them is gone. Financial solitude is not the same as financial secrecy. The couple is not hiding anything from each other. They trust each other completely, which is precisely why the knowledge sharing that would protect each of them is never prioritized. What's the point of explaining the details of every investment account when the other person trusts that it's all being handled well? What's the urgency of documenting where all the insurance policies are when neither of them is planning to need that information anytime soon? The comfort of mutual trust, the thing that makes a long marriage work, is exactly the thing that makes financial solitude invisible. And invisible problems, by definition, are the ones that cause the most damage when they materialize. The structure of how financial responsibilities distribute inside long marriages is remarkably consistent. There is typically one person who manages the investment and banking relationships, who knows the account numbers, the login credentials, the advisor's names and phone numbers, the specific holdings and their current values, the automatic transactions that run without attention every month. And there is typically one person who manages the operational and administrative dimensions, the bills, the insurance renewals, the household accounts, the recurring service relationships. In both cases, the other spouse may have general awareness that these things are handled, but specific knowledge of almost none of it. Neither division is wrong. Both are efficient. The problem is not that the division exists. The problem is that neither person has ever asked, if the other person were suddenly absent, would I know what they know? And more precisely, is the information they carry recorded anywhere that I could access independently? I want to ground this in the experience of someone I worked with named Cornelius. Cornelius was 69 years old when his wife of 41 years died of a stroke, sudden, without warning, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. He was a retired civil engineer, methodical, technically capable, someone who had organized his professional life with the precision that infrastructure work demands. His wife had managed the family's financial and administrative life throughout their marriage with an equivalent precision. She knew the accountant, the attorney, the insurance contacts. She managed the investment account correspondence, filed the tax documents, maintained the household calendar of recurring financial events. Cornelius knew the broad strokes. They had always been financially comfortable. She managed things well. Everything was fine. When she died, he discovered that fine was not the same as documented. The search that followed her death, a search through files and drawers and cabinets and email folders, conducted during the worst weeks of his life, trying to reconstruct a complete picture of a financial life he had never needed to know in detail, took Cornelius nearly 5 months to complete. During those 5 months, he missed an insurance renewal deadline that cost him coverage he subsequently needed. He found 3 accounts he had not known existed at all, 2 of which required specific procedural actions within a defined window that he had not met because he had not known the accounts existed or what their requirements were. And he made a decision about the investment portfolio, not because he had been advised to do so, but because the advisor who called him in the 3rd week after his wife's death was persuasive, and he did not yet have the full picture to evaluate what was being proposed, that he later assessed as costing him meaningfully against what a patient, uninstructed holding of the existing structure would have produced. The revelation I want to name is not that these consequences happened. It is why they happened in a form that was entirely preventable. Cornelius and his wife were not financially negligent. They were financially competent, each in their domain. What they had never built was financial transparency between the domains. The knowledge did not flow between them because it had never needed to, and when it needed to, it could not, because one of the people who carried it was gone. The preventive structure I want to describe is not complex. It does not require specialized legal instruments or significant professional involvement. It requires one document, what I call the Financial Transparency Letter, and one conversation. The document is a complete and current record of every component of the household's financial life, every account at every institution, with account numbers and login credentials, every insurance policy with policy numbers and company contacts, every ongoing professional relationship, attorney, accountant, advisor, with name and contact information, every automatic transaction scheduled monthly or annually, the location of every important document, including the will, the Social Security situation for each spouse, and what changes upon the death of either, what income continues after a death, and what stops. This document, stored in a location both spouses know and reviewed together at least once a year, converts what is otherwise a 5-month search into a one-afternoon orientation. And it removes the urgency that produces the decisions Cornelius made in the 3rd week, the urgency that exists when a person does not know enough about their situation to know what they should do and what they should emphatically not do. The conversation is about the second dimension of the problem, the strategic one. What should the surviving spouse actually do with the money in the first year? The answer, which I want to state directly because it runs counter to the urgency that grief and financial professionals both tend to create, is almost nothing irreversible. The insurance payout should go into a safe, liquid instrument, a high-yield savings account or short-duration treasury bills, and stay there for at least 12 months. The investment portfolio should be held in its current structure unless there is a specific, time-sensitive, clearly documented reason to change it. The house should not be sold because it feels too large, and a new one should not be bought because moving feels like progress. The reason for this 12-month holding posture is not bureaucratic caution. It is an empirically supported recognition that financial decisions made in the first year of widowhood are systematically worse than decisions made in the second year or later. That the combination of grief, information deficit, and the predatory attention of financial professionals who specifically target recent widows and widowers produces a decision quality that is genuinely worse than doing nothing and waiting. Cornelius understood this in retrospect. He told me in one of our meetings 2 years after his wife's death that the only decision he was glad he had made quickly in the first year was the decision to stop making decisions until he had a complete picture and a clearer mind. The decisions he regretted were the ones made in the first 3 months. The financial stability he eventually achieved came not from the early decisions, but from the patient, deliberate, well-informed choices that became possible once the picture was complete and the worst of the acute grief had settled into something more manageable. He described the difference as the difference between acting in an emergency and planning for a future, and said the hardest thing had been recognizing in the weeks after the death that the emergency was not financial. The financial situation was stable. The financial emergency he perceived was the product of not knowing enough to know that it was stable. What I want to leave you with is direct and specific. Within the next 30 days, not someday, within the next 30 days, sit down with your spouse and create the financial transparency letter. Set a date for it now, today, before this conversation fades. Schedule it in a calendar. 2 hours, with all of your account information in front of you, producing a document that both of you know how to find. If you are the spouse who manages the financial details, what you are doing is a gift of incalculable value to the person you love most. If you are the spouse who trusts that things are handled, what you are doing is ensuring that you will be capable of continuing rather than merely surviving if the trust you carry is suddenly the only thing left. The document is the conversation made permanent, and the conversation, postponed for decades by the same mutual trust that makes a long marriage work, is the one that this video is asking you to have.